Welcome back to Pulpmythos. Hereditary. That's the movie we chose to watch this weekend, and I'm here with Spencer as normal. It's me, Brian, and we're gonna start immediately going into this review. First of all, if you're returning, thanks for checking out the channel. Subscribe if you haven't. We're going to be putting content up every single Sunday, and even more so than that. Like I've said in the past, we got some scripted stuff coming. We got a few other ideas, but we're definitely putting up the shows every Sunday evening. So subscribe so you can be a part of that. Thanks for the comments. Saw a couple comments. We do read them. Appreciate it. Thumbs up. Appreciate those too. And here we go. So we chose Hereditary, which came out a couple years ago, 2018?
Yeah, I think that's what it said on IMDb.
Yeah, and this was Spencer's choice. It's something that's been on my radar. Okay. Well, I'm actually glad I saw it, because it's a frustrating movie for me, and we're gonna definitely go into why. But would you recommend? We're gonna jump right into the spoiler. Before we do that, would you recommend it, or who would you recommend it to, or would you not?
I don't know. Like, to me, if it's someone who's got a little bit of time to kill, like, it's not. There's parts. I don't know. We used to watch a lot of 1-star movies when they used to do stars on Netflix, like on purpose. And this to me would be if somebody was trying to. They were drinking one night and they were like, "Hey, let's make fun of some shit." This would be on that radar. There were some scenes that were great. Like, it was bloody and graphic, but I don't know. Like, and we had talked about it before about how there was parts that they kind of didn't do well. There's other parts that were good, but I don't know. I don't know who I wouldn't not recommend it, but I also wouldn't give it like a glowing review.
Yeah, because it's sort of two movies in one, and so you have a lot of the family drama stuff, which is really well done. A few scenes in particular are really well done, but then it turns into a very, very graphic, violent movie, a very graphic imagery. So if you're into sort of the family drama type films, but you don't like disturbing images, you're not going to like this movie. So it's designed for people who don't mind seeing disturbing imagery. So I will put that up front. It's worth your time at least once, maybe, to sit through. I know some people absolutely love this movie. I was looking through some reviews. Great for them. I'm not one of those people, and I'm going to explain why. And if you disagree with anything we say, feel free to comment. And if you don't think I'm getting it, explain it to me. But if you're into horror films, sure, check it out. Just for the third act alone is a very cool horror sequence. So, but you got to sit through a lot of shit to get to that third act. So yeah, there you go. If I was to give it if it was a star system of 1 out of 4 stars, I'd probably give it I might give it 1 star, maybe a star and a half, maybe. Okay.
I would say maybe 2, like a
2, maybe 2,
depending on what it is. The reason you were watching it.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Jumping in, full spoilers ahead, and we're gonna hit them very quickly. So first, the movie was directed by a first-time director. I think I'm saying his name right, Ari Aster. He's the guy that did Midsummer, which I don't know if I'm going to watch now. Maybe maybe I will, maybe I won't. That film got very mixed reviews compared to this one. This one actually got quite good reviews.
Hereditary. That was one of the reasons I wanted to pick it. Like, I was looking at reviews online. It said, like, under the radar horror movie. So I was like, shit, this one's an under the radar one. I said, maybe this will be good.
I'll say, as a big compliment to him, like I said, there's some really interesting imagery, and the film I think I saw was only made for like $10 million, which it looks like it cost more than that, in my opinion. So, I'll give him props for that. The film stars Alex Wolff as Peter, the son. I'm probably just going to be calling him son, father, mother throughout the review, but Gabriel Byrne as Steve, the father. Toni Collette as Annie, the mother. And Millie Shapiro, this was her, I think, first film as playing Charlie.
Robert Shapiro's daughter.
Yeah.
Actually, I have no idea.
Toni Collette, best known, probably the I would say Gabriel is well known too. He did like Unusual Suspects, Miller's Crossing, which I think is a masterpiece.
Yes.
Point of No Return, one of my favorite movies. And Toni Collette did Little Miss Sunshine, which I think is really good,
Bates
very
Motel.
good. So the movie is rated R for horror, violence, disturbing images, language, drug use, brief graphic nudity. It's 2 hours and 7 minutes. That first mistake. Should have shaved that down. It's classified by IMDb as drama, horror, mystery. It came out June 8th, 2018. And here we go. So we're going full spoilers, as I said. I'm going to tell you, I wrote down all of my deepest gut reactions in like a paragraph, sort of. I'm going to read that, and then we can discuss it a little bit, and then we'll go from there. So the movie clearly had themes, I think. Depression, family drama, loss, grief. There's a whole thing about sleeping issues that just kept coming up throughout the film. Mother-son relationships. I think mental illness. I got that just from watching the movie. I think those were
Well, I
things
think
he
so
was trying
too,
to explore.
because the name of the movie is Hereditary. So
Hereditary.
they talked about how she was talking about her mom saw all these things. Her dad was, this, that, and the other. They talked about, schizophrenia and all these things. So to me, when you're looking at those, they try to justify it, towards the end, that it wasn't necessarily mental illness, but I think that it was. And
Yeah,
then
well, I think he still was, trying to using the supernatural stuff, still trying to talk about those kind of issues. It felt like two movies being forced together.
I don't disagree. Like it's. I, I think that they did a good job setting up a premise at the beginning, and then the end was a twist. But I don't think how they got there was well done.
Yeah. My second thing, Charlie is the most interesting character in the film, but is killed 30 minutes in.
Well, yes, and I kept hoping that, because I felt like the supernatural elements, the Toni Collette seeing the ghosts and all those things, and I was like, damn. So I was hoping that maybe the sister would turn into a ghost and do something, or be, some part of the story still, and she wasn't. And they talk about her having an allergic reaction, and that's what caused it. And then you find out later that the son was having the same issue. So I'm like, well, was it an allergic reaction? Was it like, are they both allergic to weed? Clearly not, because he smokes it throughout the whole movie. Like, so I didn't know what to make of how that was transpiring.
Well, you introduce Charlie, and like I said, it's the most interesting developed character. She enjoys sleeping in a treehouse in the evenings, even though it's too cold. She loves chocolate. She makes toys, which is interesting. Why she do that? Her mother makes models, so maybe she's following in her mother's footsteps. She cuts the head off of a fucking bird, and they don't, that's interesting. What's that about? This is early in the film. You're right. She has a nut allergy, which that's a big gripe I have with the film. I'll go into it later. But yeah, she seems interesting. She has a little book. She likes to draw. She sees things that seem a little odd. She seems to notice bizarre things. Literally, the first 30 minutes, every scene that's interesting is Charlie, and then you kill her, and then we're forced for the next hour to be with, I think, who's the least interesting character. And we'll go into that later too. I love the more supernatural stuff in the movie. The satanic evil stuff I thought was well done, and I like the way it was shot. That stuff was shot. Particularly the the effects. There was an Evil Dead vibe, especially in the last act, as far as the way things were shot.
I love the imagery. Like every, so we talk about that Midsummer being another one of this guy's films. I think visually it's probably amazing, and I don't remember if you said that on camera or off. Well, not camera, I guess voice. About how he filmed this for very cheap, and the effects and everything else felt like a much higher budgeted film. But when you look at Midsummer, to me, would it be visually appealing? Would it be something that maybe I want to watch? Maybe, but I wouldn't have very high expectations for it based off of the storytelling in this one. However, he could have a better writer, better producers for Midsummer. Like, I don't know if this one was just kind of oddly written and he just tried to put it together or what. I don't know.
Next point, we're almost done. Got three more. And I sort of said this a few minutes ago. Way too much time spent with the mother, who I think is the least interesting character in the film. I got bored. I checked my time like 2 or 3 times throughout the movie. And in long films, I don't typically do that. If we watched a movie last week, which was a very slow burn, the Blackcoat's Daughter, and I never was like, oh, what time it is? What time is it? I was invested in what was happening. This movie, there were several scenes where I was not. I was just like, damn, what are we doing?
Well, and we talked about that too. I felt like when you look at,
and I like Blade Runner, so we put that out there.
But all those scenes led up to something. Like, you didn't feel misled. I felt like in this movie, all the little scenes and clues and stuff didn't have a payoff. Like, they weren't. It's kind of like they were setting you up for a twist, but then they never gave it to you. Right? And there is a big twist at the end of this movie.
Oh yeah.
But to me, what they were setting us up for didn't feel like it was part of the twist or part of the movie. It just felt like the whole movie was misleading us until the last 30 minutes. And then it was its own movie. It was like a short.
Yeah. Yes, actually. Yeah. And then my final main point, the main focus of the movie should have been Charlie and Peter and not the mother. They should have had the bulk of the screen time. We should have developed, because by the end, by the last scene, it's clear that those are the most important characters, especially Charlie. And you could argue, well, the loss, her death is the catalyst that, caused all the other events to happen. Well, rewrite it so that it's different, because you could have easily spent another hour of the film developing the brother-sister relationship, having the weird stuff happening. Then you have Charlie's death, which affects Peter, which leads to the finale. It needed a rewrite for what it felt, for some odd reason, that he had this interesting idea for a character. You had this mother who was building these models, which is interesting, and that went nowhere. By the way, I kept thinking that was going to
just
be
destroyed all of it.
significant.
It was just nothing.
So I think he had the idea of this character, and it's well performed. And I've been shitting on her this whole time. It's not the performance that I'm complaining about. It's the way the story is told. The performance is great. She's a great actress. Everything she does is good. It's the story being told, because by the time you get to the end, you realize her character is insignificant. The last act of the film, she's headless. She's not even. You know what I'm saying? Like that. She's a pointless character by the time you get to that final act of the movie. And I don't. It should have been Charlie. Charlie shouldn't have died for at least an hour and a half into the film. There should have been more build with her and Peter, and then I would have cared more, I think.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree, but I also think that if they would have spent, because they talked about how her death and Toni Collette's, the mom, how she basically blamed Peter for it. Like, she, was, really mad at him for it and blamed him and all this stuff, but they never expanded on it. They had one argument at the dinner table, and then that was it.
One of the best scenes in the movie.
But that's what I'm saying. They should have built upon that. If they killed her off early, that's fine, but then build off to how that affects their relationship and why it affects their relationship. And then they started talking about in the past how she tried to basically, burn.
I want to go into that. Yeah. Because all we know about Peter for the bulk of the film is that he's a pothead. That's it. That's all we know. And then, yeah, you get that revelation mid-film, which is one of my. We're going to go into that right now, as a matter of fact. So I wrote a list. It's things that made me laugh. I felt the tone was odd in this film. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say up front, I might have been in a bad mindset to watch this movie. It was midnight. I had just woken up from a nap. I had a long day of work. And I had a piece of apple pie with ice cream and a Red Bull. So
Jesus.
I had this is all sugared up. I have this delicious pie. I'm rested. I just napped. Like I said, I had a long work day, but I had it was a good work week. I was happy with everything that transpired in my week. I was feeling good, and I'm sitting there with this delicious dessert, a Red Bull, and I start watching this movie. So I'm in a mindset that's not I don't know, things were more amusing to me, I guess.
Well, not only that, shit, Brian. Like by the time you're halfway through the movie, you're starting to come down off this sugar rush
That too.
and Red Bull high.
So I will say that. So things that made me laugh. Charlie losing her head. I I thought it was so ridiculous. The lead up to it, I just couldn't stop laughing. I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" And then I remember I stopped it. I rewound it to watch it again, and then I checked the time. That's how I know it's 30 minutes. I was like, "This is fucking 30 minutes," and I'm looking at the time of how long the movie is, and I'm like, "Where the hell do we go from here?" And so I'm a little irritated at that point. So that didn't help. The montage of the mother crying. So the most disturbing scene, one of the most disturbing scenes in the movie was to me when Peter's laying in bed. He's in shock after Charlie's death, and you can just hear her saying goodbye to her husband, that she's going to go in the car, and you as the viewer know what she's about to find. That the way that was shot was brilliant. I thought that was great. I had a little pit in my stomach. I was like, ooh, I could feel it because you knew what was about to happen. And it was all non-visual, which which I thought was funny. One of the most sad, depressing scenes. But then we go into this dumbass montage of her crying in different rooms, and the way it was cut, it made me laugh. I thought it was humorous. I went from being upset to laughing, and I don't know. I don't. How did you specifically that sequence? Because I don't know. Maybe I was just in a weird
I don't
mood.
I don't think so. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about how it set it up well. But
Yes.
we talked about this already, that it didn't execute or end well. Um, like I think that her crying everywhere, like that's a legit, to me, a parental reaction.
Yes.
But you fall by the wayside when the dad literally had no reaction. Like he was just like almost like he was numb. Now that's not an unlikely scenario. One of them's basically got to be strong. One of them's got to pick up. But for her to be like like, I don't know. I guess that's a good. To me, it was a sign of a good actress. If I can hate the character,
Even though she's
then
going through something horrible.
yes, like she's going through something awful, and I fucking hated her. So to me, that's a notch in her belt as far as acting chops.
Like I said, she's a great actress.
But to me, you get to the end and you hate her. To me, that hurt the story. Making her an unlikable character,
Yes.
to me, hurt the story.
Because you forced me as the viewer to be with her the majority of the story. So I don't really like this character. I'm annoyed at her. And yet I got to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with her. Well, I think that was a mistake. Imagine this. Imagine Charlie and Peter for an hour of film, maybe an hour and a half of the movie. We get to see their sibling relationship. We get to hear about Charlie's dreams about what it is she wants to do when she grows up. Oh, she loves making these toys or whatever. And yes, I know it all ties that she's possessed by this demon thing. Yeah, I get all that. But let's go to the human side of her, and we learn more about who she is, and there's a dynamic with the family, and maybe she's really spending time with her mother and trying to build that relationship, but Peter's still concerned because of the paint thinner thing, and you build this relationship, and then when she dies, oh my God, the audience, we're going to be reeling in our seats. We're going to be heartbroken because we actually feel who this character was and her relationships. And now the mother
No,
crying
it's happy.
hurts a little more. But all right, where
Yeah,
are we at?
because
Yeah.
no, but like you were saying, you try to be empathetic, you try to be sympathetic to this character because she's going through all this, but then you start learning more things about how she is not a good person. And then, you find out that the grandmother's like involved in this, some stuff. So maybe, you know, she's not a good person based on her genes or her genetics. But to me, to focus that much on a story of somebody who does not have a whole lot of redeeming qualities was a poor focus point. And you said that, like, focus on the kids more. And if the way the movie ended, if you were focusing on Peter more, I think it would have been better.
Yeah.
I think he was a good actor. The acting in the movie I thought was great.
Yeah. My
Like,
my beef is purely with the story, the way it was told. Not the performances or the imagery or anything like that. It was the script. The script needed a rewrite, a massive rewrite. I feel. All right, next
yeah,
funny thing. I just mentioned it. The thing that made me laugh, the paint thinner story. When she's in, so she meets Joan, and we're hanging out in her apartment, and she's telling stories, and then she tells, we don't know this. I can't even remember. This is like an hour or more into the movie. She's telling why does her and Peter have this weird relationship? Well, we discover it because one night while she was sleepwalking, she covers Charlie and Peter and herself in paint thinner and lights a match to burn them all alive. And so ever since then, Peter is afraid she's trying to kill him. When she told the story, I just started laughing, and that was probably the number one scene where the movie completely lost me. From then, in other words, I made my mind up that I didn't, care for the movie at that point. I was like, what the hell? Um, I don't know. What
I
do you think during that scene?
well, to me, it was the whole time when we're talking about like mental illness. I'm like, that's not sleepwalking. I've had kid, I've had kids that sleepwalk. Like one of my kids tried to slide down the stairs, banister, half asleep, and I'm like, oh shit! So I'm sprinting up the stairs trying to grab her off the banister. Like
Yeah,
she didn't try to set me on fire. Your cognitive ability when you were sleepwalking is not fully aware. I mean, and I know Step Brothers is a comedic version of that.
yeah,
But when you think of sleepwalking, it's more rambling stuff. Unless she was on Ambien, she's not. You're more with it when you're on Ambien, but it's kind of your brain's not turned on all the way, so you don't really remember. But they didn't, imply that she was on any sleep medication. So for her to do that and blame it on sleepwalking, immediately I was like, well, that's bullshit. So apparently they didn't do enough research on, mental illness or sleepwalking because
yeah. It was just a ridiculous story. Like I don't. Like I said, it needed the script needed a rewrite because I think that because when you really think about it, that is the catalyst for their relationship being where it's at. That and it's such an insane thing. You know what I mean? Like you spend part of the movie thinking, oh, this is this legit sort of family drama with issues with the family and all this stuff, and then you have something as ridiculous as that, which doesn't feel natural or real, and you've already pulled me out of anything realistic before you even get to the supernatural stuff.
oh yeah,
Uh,
I agree.
so yeah, well, okay. Next thing, this made me chuckle a little bit, not a huge laugh, but when she started building a miniature of the accident,
I
uh,
did laugh during that too. Like
because the scene you pan in and you see the telephone pole, and I immediately think, oh, is that what she's doing? And then you see the detail, and the father's pissed about it, and she's justifying it, but then it never really comes up again. I don't know. It was just a bizarre. I don't even know why that's a scene you could have cut from the movie.
yes,
And
because to me it was a scene that put a strain on their relationship, but then once again it never paid off. Like the the dad was pissed because he should have just been like, look, I know this is weird, but I'm just trying to find a way to deal with this
And
because I
that's
don't know
what,
how else to deal with it. And then it
yes.
would have been for her to make it like it was normal or like okay. To me, that pissed me off. I was just like, what? But everybody deals with shit in different ways. But for her to just be like, look, I'm just trying to deal with this. I don't know how else to do it. I'm really sorry. Um, I'll stop or anything. To me, would have gave her this semblance of a likable character again. But it goes back to the mental illness part. Her not knowing that it's crazy. Normally, that's a crazy person thing. Like people who are crazy don't know that they're crazy a lot of the times. So I that was my issue, was like it was bouncing back and forth. Like you're trying to make this character going through this hardship and you're just like, oh, you're trying to feel sorry for her, but on the same note, she's doing this crazy shit. So now you're like tiptoeing that line of between crazy and redeemable. And I don't know, I think it bounced a little bit too hard back and forth and I couldn't keep up.
Yeah, exactly. Next scene, Peter smashing his face on the desk. Now, the initial part of that scene wasn't funny to me. I actually thought it was really weird. His arms lifting up and the look on his face. But it was then he starts smashing his face. I was into it. But then when he falls to the floor and he sort of cries out for whatever reason, it made me laugh. It was that one shot that bothered me. And yet again, things like that kept happening throughout the movie, and I'm like, maybe it's just me? I don't know. Maybe there's a weird tone thing with this movie. And then I kept thinking, well, how would I have felt in a theater with an audience? Would I look at this different? Because there was a couple of shots specifically at the end where he wakes up in the room and she's in the corner on the ceiling, on the roof, or not at the roof, but on the ceiling of the room, which I thought was a cool shot. And I was like, in the theater, that might scare the shit out of me on a big screen.
Well, I can tell you how I would have reacted in a theater. I've went and seen a couple movies that had some chuckling parts, and when everybody else is uncomfortable and doesn't know how to react, it makes me laugh harder. So I would have been the one person sitting in the theater dying laughing, like just been like like cackling, because like if shit doesn't make sense like that, and I already think it's a little funny, I would have made everyone else uncomfortable and started laughing harder.
Now, final thing that made me laugh, and this was dumb as hell. I mean, I'm gonna say it. The way it was shot, every part of it was stupid. When the husband burns alive, you build up the scene because you see it coming. I mean, my God, you have. He's standing there, and because she believes if you burn this book, and and I'm shocked. Like, all right. It made no sense why she wanted to burn the damn book in the first place. Not really to me. And then when she's like, okay, I got to burn the book, and she establishes, oh, if I burn the book, I burn. So she's telling her husband, if we burn this book, I burn, I die, but I'm willing to make the sacrifice. I love you, blah, this whole emotional scene. And then and then he refuses to burn it. So she chucks it in the fire, and then he bursts in the flames. The logic doesn't, the supernatural elements don't really add up. And then the scene is just, I don't know. I was like, holy shit. Okay.
I don't disagree with you, but we were talking about, Black Coat's daughter, about how it kind of left you to think, left you to kind of conclude some things on your own.
Yeah.
This one not only didn't leave you any space for that, it gave you a weird ass solution. To me, if she would have been holding anything in her hand, showing that maybe she set him on fire and she was crazy and delusional, that to me would have made more sense, because now you're just like, well, did something set him on fire or was it her? Like, to me, adding that question to it would have made that scene more powerful. But to have her arm catch on fire for burning a book and then that book not come into play later, like it would have been different if Peter had that book in his hand when he went up at the end. Like he's thumbing through the book. It's super important, but it never came back into play.
Yeah.
The whole book's purpose was to burn the father alive, and
that was it. That was the whole. Yes, and a matter of fact, going to that point, the ceilings being one of my thoughts when the movie first started was, damn, their ceilings are high, The whole reason was for the scene of her hanging out on the, crawling around. Like that was the whole reason the set looked like that. Things were made to fit. I guess the story that had been written. Um, so those were the things that made me laugh. Now I have extensive notes of scene by scene of the movie. We're not going to go through all of them at all. I'm going to skip through them starting from the beginning, and this shouldn't take too long, and then we'll get to the ending movie sequence, which we will pick apart. And if at any point you want to, if I skip over something, and obviously you want to dive into it, feel free.
Well, there's this episode of Mythbusters that. Oh, wait, I'll go ahead. I actually do want to touch on that because it reminded me of something that you just said. But go ahead.
Okay. So the opening shot of the movie.
Wait. I'll just talk about it real quick before I forget.
Okay.
On Mythbusters, they had James Cameron. It was a James Cameron episode where they were basically debunking whether or not Rose and Jack could fit on the door. And then the Mythbusters proved that they could have both survived on the door. And then James Cameron at the end was like, hey, look, in the script, it said that he had to die. So he had to die. He's like, whether there's a bit of a plot hole in that or not, he said it just was the way it was. So when you're talking about them setting up scenes for that, that's exactly what happened. Like it's, the roof being high through the whole thing had nothing to do with them having this 3-story mansion. It literally had to do with her climbing around on the ceiling. Like they fit the set to fit the little plot devices that they put in there.
And I don't even really care about that movie, but I'm gonna defend James Cameron in that the character, was it Jack? What was DiCaprio's character? It's Jack, right?
Yeah.
Jack, it doesn't matter whether or not he would have fit or not. The whole purpose of that scene is that he didn't want to risk it. He didn't want to risk her getting knocked off, and he was willing to sacrifice himself and die because he cared for her so much. And even the thought of trying to fit on there and jeopardizing her life, he wanted to give her the best chance possible at survival. And so it was more of in other words, it was a character reason that all played out. That's the way I perceived it, at least.
I don't care enough about that movie. I don't like James Cameron all that much.
So. Let's watch Titanic and pick apart Titanic.
I'd be down.
So okay, where was I?
And the opening of Billy Zane. No, I'm just.
I love Billy Zane.
I know you do.
We should just do every Billy Zane movie.
The Phantom.
Dude, I love the Phantom. All right. The opening shot of this movie was a huge mistake, and this is why. And I mean the opening shot of the film is an obituary. It's in tiny ass print. It's in the middle of the screen. If I had been in a theater and that shit popped up on the screen and I'm trying to eat my popcorn and I look at it and I don't get to read the beginning of it and I'm trying to read through it really quick and then it cuts it goes to the scene, I'd have been furious. I did too. That if anything, if I'm going to make a legitimate saying the director was wrong, it's that. You may think it's minor, but you're starting your movie by irritating your audience or potentially irritating your audience, at least me. You put something on screen that, like I said, A, is very tiny print, and then feel like I missed something. And, yeah.
Well, yeah, because regardless of whether it was important or not, which it turns out it was. But
it was, yeah.
But, there's certain aspects of movies, and we just picked apart 8 that had no sense and didn't have any importance to this main plot. But so if this was important to the main plot, then a portion of any theater goers missed it.
Yes.
And I tried. I got about 3/4 of the way done, and then it went. So I was like, well, shit, let me rewind it so I can read it. And then the last part was a normal obituary, survived by blah, blah, blah. But to me, that was the fact that I missed that and felt like I missed something because I didn't get to finish it. I would have been pissed in theaters.
Yes. Yeah, that was my immediate, I wrote a note immediately. I was like, what the fuck? What do you do it like that? But okay. So going the way you had the models, the way there were several shots, especially early on in the film and throughout the whole thing, the way they would do cuts, the way you would shoot rooms in the house. I was getting a lot of Wes Anderson vibes, It was like Wes Anderson in Hell. It's like this very depressing style. But it clearly, I would be curious to watch Midsummer now, just based on that. Is it similar? His style. Is it influenced at all? I enjoy Wes Anderson films. I know Larry, who's on the channel sometimes, does not at all. I can't remember if we've talked. I don't
I
about.
I'm about 50-50. Like
You're
there's
okay.
I think it depends on who's in it
Yeah,
and
yeah,
who the main
yeah.
characters are, because some of them I enjoy, but I really like, um I like different characters. So like if depending on who his main cast is, I think depends on whether or not I'm on board.
Aesthetically, was there anything you felt this reminded you of, or did you feel it was very original, or how
I
did you?
I, I felt it was horror movie ish. Like I didn't feel like it was offbeat as far as that goes. I didn't feel like aesthetically it was a whole lot different than any other horror movie. I did like because everything was like a grayish, so it almost reminded me more of shit. I don't know why the name's escaping me now. Christopher Nolan. There we go. It took me a second,
Hmm.
but how it felt more gritty. Like it felt like gray and gritty, but which isn't out of the norm for suspense movies. Horror movies, it's a little bit different tone normally, but I wouldn't say that this wasn't. I I think it made me feel like it should have been a different kind of movie. Just by the color, the way scenes
Mm.
were shot, it felt to me more like a suspense thriller as opposed to horror. But you're billing it as a horror movie, so I felt kind of misled just by the way it was shot.
The first scene that made me irritated by the story at all was when the mother, I keep calling, was it Annie? I think it's the character's name. Is it Annie? Yes, Annie.
I was gonna say
Annie,
here, I don't know.
when she forces Charlie to go to the party with Peter, that's just a weird ass scene. And I was like, well, I guess she wants them to get out of the house. And then we learn later about the paint thinner thing. So maybe I don't know. The
I think
dynamic was just weird.
that part pissed me off because she sent him to go. He was like, she said, "Is there going to be drinking?" There is no way that she didn't know he was a piehead. Like I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
like pieheads get blind to the weed smell, but like if he's sitting there blowing it out the window, his whole room is still going to smell like weed. He's got like bongs and all kinds of stuff. If his mom even looked inside of his room, she would know like immediately.
No way
So
you could
for
smell it.
yeah,
None.
so for them to pretend like even if he wasn't drinking, like he wasn't going to the party to drink, she had to know it's a teenage party. Shit like that was going to happen. So you're sending your 13-year-old, and this from the get go. This is why I hated her. So like even before I found out she was crazy and tried to burn him alive, and like he was forcing her to take her to a party. Like I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. So,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, a 13-year-old at a party eating weed brownies and they had nuts in them, and she started.
Well,
So yeah, I don't.
that's next on my list. And this is probably why the decapitation scene didn't bother me as much, because I was sort of irritated, and I was irritated because of the nut allergy. At the funeral they point out, oh, she's eating chocolate or whatever. Oh, does it have nuts in it? We forgot your EpiPen. And then we get to this party. She didn't bring her EpiPen again. And then Charlie's like, "Oh, go eat that chocolate cake," and she just eats random ass chocolate cake. Anyone who knows anyone with peanut or allergies knows that they live with a certain level of fear in their life, and they're not going to eat just random shit. Um,
Well,
Especially at that age. She's 13 at this point.
that's
It's
what I was
not
just
like
getting ready to point out is
it's
how
not
old
like
she
she's
was.
7. If she was, yeah, she was 7, sure, I get it. But even Peter, yeah, you're like, oh, Peter's trying to hook up with this chick, but he sees this big ass chocolate cake and he doesn't even question if it has nuts in it. There was just a lot of, and like I said, even at the funeral, they didn't bring the EpiPen. So it's the whole family is sort of like very casual about this, deadly ass nut allergy, and there's no, I don't know. All that was just bugging the hell out of me, and so she's dying, and so I'm like, well, you guys are dumbasses, which led to this. And then when she sticks her head out, it's so ridiculous. She sticks her head out to breathe, and then yeah, she gets decapitated. And like I said, this is 30 minutes in the movie. 30 minutes.
But to me, like whatever was in the middle of the road, if they want to include a supernatural element, they should have whatever was in the middle of the road, her get decapitated, and then him look in the mirror and there's nothing in the middle of the road. You know what I'm saying? Like, make it to where it was like a planned thing, not an accident. Because then to me, that would have added that element a lot sooner, as opposed to basically waiting until the last 15 minutes for me to be like, well, what the fuck was happening? Why did she die? Like, I think there could have been, and like, that's a rewrite. That would have taken half a second for him to look in the mirror and then kind of question himself and then just kind of use it as a throwaway thing.
And yeah, the shot of her head, to me, like I said, you had the great scene of him in shock in the bed, and you hear everything happening, the mother discovering the body, and it was really well done. And then you do this montage of not only her crying, but before that you do the shot of Charlie's head covered in ants. Really cool effect. But it was so hit you over the head with shock value that for me there was no emotional impact to it. It was almost comical. At least that was for me. I don't know about you. How did you feel about that whole, like, it was about a 3-4 minute sequence?
I don't know. I didn't feel like, once again, even that early in the movie, it didn't feel important.
It didn't feel earned, that the sympathy, because like I said, I don't know them yet.
And even her character, who clearly she was dealing with some shit, and she seemed like she was special needs, whether it's, and I don't mean like, but autism, Asperger's, severe anxiety. There's a lot of things that pointed towards her having a special need, because being at 13, carrying around a book and drawing everybody is
and chopping the bird's head off was weird, which we know ties into other supernatural things. But you're right. At that point in the film, there's nothing supernatural.
Yeah. So, and once again, it never really links that stuff in. Like, it never ties it to it. Now, some things that I've put together just now since we were talking, maybe I don't remember the name of the evil demon, eighth circle.
It's a real demon. Yeah, it's a real like thing.
But her constantly sleeping in the cabin could have been, or in the treehouse or whatever, could have been part of the reason that she was off and the reason she was doing those things. Because if that was their meeting place, which clearly it was,
yes,
it could have also been the same reason that the mom was a little batty, a little bit fucked up. Because they could have been using that treehouse. So if it was some kind of like on a way line where there was extra demon power there, I don't know how demons work. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it would have made sense if they conducted a bunch of those things there and it started to infect those two, because they were constantly up there. But so once again, that's me just drawing, almost reaching, like drawing to conclusions that they didn't spell out any of that stuff. That's me trying to make sense of a movie that didn't really make sense.
Yeah. And I did a little looking into it after watching the movie. Yeah, that particular demon is in books and stuff from, history, and I think there's some connection. Yeah, he's one of the kings of hell, one of the top, angels that serve Lucifer. And there's something about an image of him with 3 heads. So like the shot at the end, you have 3 women, all missing heads. It all tied in, to that shit. But you would, like I said, you have to go online and look it up if you want to know what's going on or what's supposedly going on. Let's skip to the dinner scene. One of the best scenes in the movie. Not my favorite. I'll tell you what my favorite is when we get to it. But the dinner scene was good because now we're dealing with, this is the drama, the family drama. Her saying how she feels. The reaction on Peter's face I thought was great. I thought it was a really good scene as far as this family and how they're all the issues they have with each other.
I wasn't trying to be quiet. I was trying to look up Eighth Circle of Hell just to see, like, because I was trying to once again justify why they did certain things, because maybe because they didn't really go into what, I don't think they went into it enough of why they were worshiping him, why they chose that God, what his thing was. Because, you look at the seven deadly sins, was he like the punisher of gluttony or the punisher of lust or whatever? Like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. And none of the stuff that happened made sense. Now, him like raising his hand in the middle of class was like, what that guy did. He had that big staff with the hand on it or whatever. So, like, I got that tie-in part. But why? Like, is it the punishment for school children who are rude? Like, I don't know. What was your question?
Oh, just how you felt about the dinner scene.
Well, we talked about it. Like, I think that was probably the strongest scene, and acting wise, it was great. But once again, it makes you. We talk about sympathetic characters. I hated Toni Collette even more after that scene.
Yeah.
And I was pissed off at the dad because he didn't be like, "Hey, let's talk about this. Hey, calm down." Because the son, who he didn't blame for what happened, well, I mean, you talk about like teenage suicide or something. Like, she's literally losing her shit on her kid who was there when it happened. Like, so to me, the parental dynamics, once again, like, me hating them doesn't make it a bad movie, because sometimes, Cersei from Game of Thrones was a great actress. Like, me hating her was not a slight on her acting. It was actually a, nod in her direction. But to me, like you said, if we're trying to make them redeemable characters or make characters that we're interested in, it just made me hate them. So,
yeah.
Which, if at the end doesn't necessarily not pay off, because, she chops her own head off, but I don't know.
When we get to the scene with Joan, which we haven't talked much about, but she meets Joan, and turns out she's part of this witch coven or cult or satanic group, whatever the hell you want to call them. I guess they're technically not witches, or I don't know what they are, but cultists. They when she does the seance in Joan's apartment, that's the moment the movie is like, yeah, we're doing that. Like, the movie, it literally goes from some creepy stuff to, no, we're in there, we're doing this, and then you I mean, it goes pretty crazy from that scene on, as far as the supernatural stuff, including, I like the dream sequence where she goes into Peter's room and he's covered in ants. I thought that was cool. And then you didn't know what was a dream and what wasn't a dream, and then he talks about how he was having a nightmare too.
Yes, but they never expanded
They
on that.
never.
Like, that's what I'm saying is, like, some of the scenes were brilliantly shot. Like, I kept waiting for something to pay off, and I was like, oh shit, that's awesome. And then nothing. I'm like, come on.
My favorite scene in the entire film was the family seance. I love the way it was shot. I love the way the characters reacted. I love her, getting them out of bed, taking them downstairs, pulling the table. I love the lighting. I like the sound design. Every part of that scene, I watched it a couple times, was my favorite thing in the movie. Because I just, to me, it was really good horror. It also played off of the drama of the family, and their what they're going through. I wanted more of sort of that, because it was, as much as it was supernatural, there was still a little bit of it grounded in, as far as their reactions in reality. That was my favorite scene of the whole movie.
Well, even with it being supernatural, like, unless you're aware of the supernatural, which it implied that none of them were until the very end, them having family drama based around what happened would not be unnormal. So
yeah,
for that to be the case, that's how it should have been the whole time. Like,
exactly, because she's trying to commune with their, the dead daughter, and you know what I mean. They're like bring in those things into it, and I thought it was well done. And then the father, even though he's seeing this happen, he's still questioning it, and thinks something's off. He had the part where he looks under the table to see if she's doing something,
using something. Yeah.
I thought that scene was one of the best scenes in the film. And then we talked about just about everything that takes place after that scene until the ending sequence. Is there any before we get to literally the ending sequence where Peter wakes up in his room and then uh, shit gets really weird? Is there anything else? I didn't really. I mean, we could talk about Joan, but I mean, you know, she was. Yeah, if you want to.
Well, I thought the Joan stuff was a good tie-in, but once again, I think they focus on all the wrong things. So when you have Joan, who you learn, later is, basically works with her grandmother, and that it wasn't an accident that she tried to, get her on board with all this stuff. I felt like they didn't explain her tie-in enough. And then they show the scene where she like runs to the table and she sees, Peter's picture in it, and like there's a very short part there. Like they should have had a note or had her read something to, it felt once again, I felt like they cut the wrong parts out of the movie. Now they could have never filmed them, but I felt like, they cut parts out of the movie that were important. So, you find the part where she, all the rugs. She was like, my grandmother made these rugs for everybody. Like, so she, figured out that it was, had something to do with her grandmother. So I don't know. Like like I said, I felt like they focused on the wrong parts, which made it a movie that was very difficult to follow. Because I had to watch parts of it twice because I was like playing on my phone half the time because I was like, fuck. Like, it was not drawing my attention. But then something would happen. I'd be like, oh shit, I missed something. So then I would rewind it and watch it. And it was nothing. Like I didn't miss anything. And I was just like, God damn it. It was until the last 30 minutes. Like there was parts where I didn't feel, and even with the last 30 minutes, I felt like the first hour didn't, hour and a half didn't matter. Like it just, with the exception of the sister's death and the I'm going to burn you alive talks, those are the only two things that really, to me, played into the end. Like
there's a sequence. Yeah, there's a section of the movie. It's like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes of just sort of people being depressed and nothing really happening at all. And I actually wrote a note about that. I'm like, it's just shots of people being depressed. There's nothing happening in the movie. It should have been cut down if that's what he was going to do. So the ending, I'll just move through it. It's wild. He wakes up in the bed. The mother is in the corner of the room on the ceiling, just sort of looking at him. And at this point, she's, I guess, possessed by the demon or whatever, the Demon King. She crawls across the wall, which I didn't really love that effect. I might have even not had it in there it was okay.
It didn't matter. Like, why'd you give her that ability? Like, it didn't. It was just dumb.
It was sort of pointless.
It was creepy and cool looking. It was a great cinematic shot, but to me, it didn't matter. It was dumb.
The creepiest shot in the entire... There's two shots that I really liked as far as creepy. The first one was at the beginning of the movie when she's in the room and she sees her mother. They just come from the funeral. She sees her mother in the corner of the room. And she sort of looks a little, and then I really liked that shot. I was like, okay, that was creepy. And then I really enjoyed, even though it's a scene that I could have laughed at, but there's something really disturbing about her headless body floating outside and then going up into the treehouse. I just like the way it was shot. But okay, so yeah, he goes downstairs. He sees his dad was burned alive. He reacts obviously to that. Then the creepy guy from the funeral, which I remembered, he was looking at Charlie real creepy. He's naked, just sort of standing there, hanging out. And so now I'm sort of like, all right, this is just crazy. The mother then comes down and chases him into the attic. And then we get the shot of Peter in the attic. He looks up. You hear great sound design. She's sawing her head off. And blood spurting everywhere, and then he looks and he sees all these.
That was probably my favorite scene.
It's a great scene, yeah. It's a very disturbing sequence, and then he jumps out the window. And if you listen, he hits the ground, and then you can even hear her continually. She's still sawing and then you actually can hear the head drop if you listen to that scene. Yet again, a really cool scene off camera that you hear, and you can visualize it based on what you're hearing. So then we see this little spirit thing go into Peter, which, okay, I looked it up and I assumed, I was a little confused on it, and a lot of people seem to have mixed thoughts, but basically it's Charlie slash the demon, because the demon was sort of in Charlie, but now she's, and that was my confusion. Is Charlie her own person, or is she like a combination of a person with this demon? And in the last shot, is it Charlie, Peter, and the demon all sort of together, or is Peter dead? Is his soul gone? That I'm not clear on. And I looked it up, and everybody sort of said it was sort of Charlie, the demon, and Peter's body.
Well, I feel like if the last half hour would have been stretched out to like an hour and a half based on those kind of elements, it would have been a fucking fantastic horror movie. I don't disagree that maybe because, based off the title of the movie and, the grandma being this queen hell bitch, I don't know what to call her, but for maybe it to follow a female line was why it skipped the mom, because the mom was bonkers and they kept trying to convince her to be part of this group and she was not, receptive to it, I guess. But clearly a 13-year-old who's impressionable was like, I think that they focused on that part. And then when they didn't want to give it to the mom because she was not being receptive to it, they chose the son because of, maybe the horrors that he saw, the damage that he had to his soul or person because of killing his sister and his mom trying to kill him. Like, I think that if they would have done any job explaining what that circle of hell meant, it would have made sense, because how it was skipping, how they were trying to pick their leader, but they just left out too much what I feel is important shit to the plot of that movie, and it didn't make sense to me. Like the ending where he became this Palom, or I think that was the name, I don't remember.
Yeah,
but
something like that.
Where he became the embodiment of that, I was like, all right, cool, but why?
It was a good visual. He goes up the treehouse. His grandmother and mother's headless corpses are bowing to this idol, which has Charlie's head on it. They take the crown off. They put it on his head. Then you have this dump of exposition of like, oh, we're a cult, and you're now the Demon King, and and like they explain the plot to him, which is sort of dumb, because if he is the demon, wouldn't he know all this shit at this point? That's why I was a little confused on whose consciousness we're seeing. I'm assuming it's Charlie also, but is it Peter and Charlie and the demon? And at that point in the movie, it's like, who cares? And that's the problem with the movie. You get to that point, you're like, I don't even care. And like I said, the mother is decapitated at this point, so it's like, why the hell did I spend an hour and a half with this character who doesn't even have a head in the final act, and it's not even about her?
Yeah, because you're building up to where Charlie's this important character. Like, she's got a lot of shit going on. The mom and the son have this strained relationship. The dad kind of seems lost in the sauce, like he just doesn't know what's going on. So you're building up Charlie to be this catalyst, this character, because clearly she's got some shit going on. And then not only do you take her out, after one argument, like, her character no longer matters. So then you go back to focusing on the mom. Well, why are we focusing on the mom? I still don't know. And that's my thing, is that it's not left to me to imply certain things. It was left without any sort of point in a direction. If you point me in two directions and make me choose a direction, that's fine. But they didn't point me anywhere. They just stated something and then gave me no reason for that statement. And I felt like that was, to me, if we're trying to base a theme of the movie, that was it. It had nothing to do with anything else. It had to do with them just not having a clear-cut vision and conveying that vision to everybody else in a productive manner.
When and I'm going to touch on this briefly because we could talk for hours about what I'm about to say. But when I think of a movie that is trying to play on my emotions and make me feel sad or depressed or whatever, I always go back to what film I think did it the best of any. One of my favorite films of all time, Old Boy. Old Boy is a movie that's offbeat, weird at times, very bizarre. But I genuinely, every time I see it or even sequences from it, it tears me up. It makes me depressed. It's sad, and I have an emotional connection to the characters in the film. The storytelling is brilliant in that movie, and it's an offbeat movie at points. There's some weird shit in that movie, but that's how it's done. So yes, that standard may be a little high. The bar may be high for me, but if you're going to try I will use the word manipulate my emotions, which entertainment, you're trying to make people feel a certain way. If you're trying to make me feel sad, that's where the bar is for me as far as film is concerned. And this movie, I just feel it was trying to do that, but it failed at it. And I didn't care. And yes, there was some great imagery, but that's about all I got from the movie. And that's sort of my final opinion and thought on the movie.
I don't disagree with that. You try to make this character, you feel sorry for the mom because of her daughter. You feel sorry for her mom because her mom was crazy. She goes to that meeting, the grief counseling meeting, and she tells this long story about all these awful things. And you're like, shit. Like, so they're trying to make you feel compassion and sorry for this character. But on the same note, she does all this awful shit. So I'm like, I can't feel compassion for somebody because to me, I know that everything that happens to people, even when they're a child or an adult or like things that happen to people shape who those people are. But at the end of the day, once you hit about 14, not even that. Once you hit adolescence, you start making choices. Now, those choices shape you as a person, but to me, they're still choices. So to me, the thing she was doing as a, 40-year-old, mid 40s. I don't know how they were trying to portray her age wise. I know how old she really is, but like, I don't know, but she's making choices. So these choices that she's making are detrimental to her family. So for me to have sympathy for a person who went through some shit, but is also fucking up her family in the process, I had zero sympathy for her. So you're talking about like, being sad or like there's not once in that movie where I was like, oh shit, that sucks. Like, it was the opposite. Like, I hated her through the whole movie. And, you talk about like sad movies or movies that not necessarily sadness, but that cause like a emotional reaction. This movie had zero. Well, I shouldn't say zero. I was angry. So I guess it did that. But I don't know. It's one of those movies that if I watch the second time, which I won't because I'm not going to waste 2 hours doing that.
Yeah.
But like if I was to watch a second time, I might be able to put some things together. But I would have to like put my phone in the other room. I would have to like watch it at 2:00 in the morning or, something to make me concentrate on only it because it didn't draw my attention enough to get me to maybe pick up the pieces that it was laying down. I don't know.
Yeah. If you loved this movie, you're not wrong. I mean, everybody has difference of opinion. There are films I love that people hate, and vice versa. So that's fine. And if you feel compelled to downvote this video, by all means, do that. But I like if you do downvote it to put in the comments what you think I'm missing or what it is about the movie that you loved.
Well, don't downvote us. Just upvote us and then disagree in the comments so that we can justify our opinion back to your opinion.
There you go. But I do enjoy debate or as far as people having different opinions on entertainment. But yeah, that's how I felt about this movie. And like you said, I was thinking about that too. Like, oh, maybe I should give it another watch and see if certain pieces fit. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing that. It's like, that's not happening. I'll watch Midsummer at some point. But my God, that movie is long. It's 2.5 hours, and then there's like a director's cut that's like 3 hours. I'm like, oh shit.
God damn.
I don't know, man.
But this is one of those movies where that might entice me to watch it.
Yeah, it's got a good
like
cast.
literally,
So did
like
this.
the acting's good,
Mhm.
but if this movie was longer, like I might be like, oh well, shit, this does get explained. Like
Yeah.
kind of like was not well Sucker Punch, but the Batman versus the Superman versus
Yeah,
Batman,
yeah, yeah.
which the director's cut was good. Like I like Snyder, and they left out so much stuff because they're trying to cut it for time and kind of shape it a little differently that I didn't like it.
Hmm.
But I think that this movie might benefit from that. I don't know because it could still be the same me being angry the whole time, and I don't know.
Well, yeah, we're gonna wrap it up here in a sec. We'll be back next week, next Sunday, with another film review, and I don't know what we're gonna review yet. There's a few possibilities as to what it will be. I'm gonna try and make it not a movie that involves Satanism and decapitations because we, I didn't. It was not by design. Both these
No,
films.
because I didn't know that either one of them. That's what it was.
I could say when I got to the end of this movie, I was like, hey, holy shit! It also involves Satanism and decapitations.
We should just watch The Witch or
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I'm gonna try and make it not a movie like there's a movie I want us to watch, but I don't know if that's in that movie. So I almost want to spoil it for myself now and see, just so we don't pick that movie. But I don't know. We'll find something, and we'll, like I said, we'll have another review
that being
next
said, though,
Sunday.
those are my
Thanks for
favorite
listening. If
kind
you're
of.
still listening at this point, yeah.
I was just gonna say those are my favorite kind of scary movies. I don't like the slasher movies as much because they're really hokey. Those are
I do, but I like watching those with people. That's more of a
yes.
friend to hang out experience. But yeah, we're gonna like I said, we'll have another review next week. If you're still, I mean, we just shat on this movie for about an hour. So if you're still listening, thanks. And anything else before we go?
No, not that we need to talk on camera or on vocal about. I have an idea for a couple movies that I've seen that were actually not
Okay.
horror. They were horror movies, but they were more suspense.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I
We'll
enjoyed.
talk. So yeah, we will see you next week. Thanks for listening, and Pulpmythos out. That's gonna be our new. That's gonna be the new ending. Everything. All right. Bye.